On Monday, we mentioned that Kenyan food distribution startup Twiga Foods had raised about $30 million in debt and equity through a fundraising round led by Goldman Sachs. Now, of course, Twiga uses an online platform to link food producers with retailers, aiming to harness technology in order to boost demand for farmers' products. Twiga, which started in 2014, has now raised a total of $55 million in debt and equity. Well, we have the CEO of Twiga Foods, Njonjo himself, joining us now in the studio to give us more details on this new round of funding. Great to have you in the studio, sir. Now, of course, looking at your company, you've basically moved from providing supply chain services for agricultural goods such as bananas and, of course, potatoes. You actually started off with bananas, and now you're diversifying the product mix, including FMCGs. With this $30 million in your pocket now, what does the next level of growth look like for your company?
I think the first thing is the problem that we're trying to solve. And the problem we're trying to solve is around poor access to market due to the fragmentation of retail. So what you find is that 6.5 million people in Nairobi fed by 180,000 retailers. So what we're finding is that the challenge on distribution is just not limited to bananas, or it's not just limited to fresh produce. It actually is a wider problem on many commodities. And the thing that we see ourselves as Twiga is expanding the portfolio to a point where a retailer can essentially acquire all their needs by logging onto our app and ordering everything, and we deliver to them, and then organizing the logistics behind that to ensure that they can source whatever it is that they need for their shop.
Right. Well, let's delve further into the numbers and the details of your operation. You started off, as I mentioned, hauling bananas. That's about 5 years ago, from farmers in in the outskirts to Nairobi, the CBD. Now, today, give us a sense of how the logistics have changed. How many farmers do you work with? What other products are you thinking of hauling now? And what's the size of the operation? You mentioned by the end of the year, you'll be looking at about 130 tons per day. What are you planning? Where are you at right now, and what are you planning?
So when I look at the scale of operation today, we serve about 8,000 customers a week, 8,000 unique customers a week, of which we deliver to 4,000 every day. When we look at the number of farmers that we deal with, about 17,000 farmers. And as we speak today, we're hauling about 200 tons of produce every day to the retail. So, and in terms of staff, we also have a huge complement. Our headcount has grown to close to 500 people in terms of permanent headcount, and we have about another 500 casuals spread across the country. So I would say that it's a bold vision that we have, and I think one of the things that we're really, really proud of is the impact that the business has, because we believe in the ethos that, you know, doing good is good business, and I think that for us has held true.
Right. Now, your business model is actually something quite special. And I say that because it does provide a simple solution to Africa's fragmented and informal retail markets. Basically, what you do is you connect farmers to the marketplace more efficiently, making food cheaper as well. What has your experience revealed about how food markets work, and certainly where other African markets are getting it wrong?
So what you find is that most of retail in Africa is informal. If you look at Kenya, is 90%. Look at Nigeria, is 98%. Everywhere that you look at in sub-Saharan Africa will be between 95% to 85%. So this problem that we see in Kenya is replicated across many other markets. What you have is outliers like South Africa, where about 60% of the retail is formalized through supermarkets. So what we see is that the problem around retail fragmentation and the inefficiency that creates across various sectors is replicated across the continent. But for us, we want to build our use case around food, because we believe that, you know, food right now is about 50% of disposable income in spend on the continent. So by focusing on food, we feel that that would give us a huge addressable market, even in other countries across the continent.
Right. Well, you must have gathered quite a lot of information and data from your 5 years in business. How do you plan to use that to improve markets across Africa going forward? How do you plan to use that data? I'm curious.
So I think the key thing is that we have a pillar which we call value-added services.
Right.
What we're realizing is that by going to the retailers, we already have so much data about them that is not available elsewhere in the market. So we're realizing that we can actually work with financial partners to provide, for example, working capital. Right now, we're working on a use case around microinsurance. Again, with the retailers. Most of these retailers lose their shops once in a while to fires, to burglaries. And I think the key thing for us is to continue using data as a means to build some of these unique products.
Right. Now, you, of course, are also planning to expand out of Kenya into other East African markets, and also you mentioned Francophone West Africa possibly going forward. Do you plan to replicate that business model in these new markets? How soon will we see that come to fruition?
So the key thing is that, especially as we move into other markets, the rollout will be nuanced to reflect the realities that you have in that particular market. So, but our objective actually in the coming year is to expand across other cities. Right now, we're actually in Nairobi. We want to get to Mombasa, Nakuru, and a couple of other local cities. And within the end of, sometime end of next year, we'll get into our first international market within the African continent. But right now, we're still doing our diligence to determine whether that will be on the East Coast or the West Coast of the continent.
Right. Well, we're certainly watching, and we thank you so much for joining us in the studio, sir. Of course, that was CEO of Twiga Foods, Mr. Peter Njonjo.